This week on Act Out, we take a special and extended look at the Forest Convergence, not a conference, a convergence that brought together folks from all over the United States, Canada, and South and Central America to talk about defending forests and dealing with climate chaos and climate justice on the front lines. From tweets to marching in the streets, this is Act Out.
Rockets! Blockade! Bulldozers swarm outside the checkpoint gate. An orange flash broke the hush and blew me into the street. I awoke next to the body of my baby. No!
Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. This week we have a special episode for you. Interviews and panels from the Forest Convergence that took place last week in the Shawnee National Forest in southern Illinois, where activists and folks from the front lines came together to sit down and not talk about what we're going to talk about, but actually plan actions on how to defend the forests that we still have, how to stand in the way with our bodies, in the way of fossil fuel and dirty energy projects around not just the United States, but beyond. So without further ado, I bring you some ideas, thoughts, and powerful insight from the Forest Convergence. Take a look.
We are here to build and continue to build a radical movement which unifies efforts to protect forests and land with those dedicated to social, environmental, and climate justice, to create a resurgence powerful enough to achieve the systemic change we need to survive, and ideally, to thrive.
But one of the things that we kids got used to were the hills and the rivers and the creeks. And at that time, you could swim in the rivers and the waters, and you could see in them, you could see under the water. And it wasn't long, I was about 12, 13, the strip mines moved into our part of the world over there on the Saline River. And all those familiar hills, all those familiar places where we had played and rode our horses and all of that, within 3 years were gone. Forever. Leveled. Forever. Everything that was a part of my kinship in growing up visually in the land was gone. Forever. And to this day, when I see those coal trucks going past my house down by Harry, even when I see the big trucks taking the last of the big grandfathers, the timber from the forest, big trees, that hurts. That hurts in a way that probably, I hate to say this, but probably only other natives or environmentalists can understand how that hurts, because I think that everyone here is attached somehow or another to the sanctity of the earth. There is something holy about it, and you know it. You feel it. It's in your eyes, it's in your heart, and it's in your voice. And to just say simply that I feel this way because I'm native is not true. I feel this way because I am a human being who was raised by the forest, who was raised by the lightning and the thunder and the rainwater and the wind. People say that maybe sounds odd to say that you were raised that way, or in proper English, reared that way. No, it's not odd at all. Those were my ancestors. Those are my relatives now as we speak. They were my influences when I was a kid. When I'm talking with environmentalists, I'm talking to people, and I say to them, as I say in the welcome to you here tonight, anyone who loves my homeland as much as I do is my brother and sister. Anyone who loves it. You don't love my homeland as much as I do, you are my enemy. And I love to gather around people who have a sense of knowing how to deal with enemies. And protests don't really do it. You can carry signs all day long. The coal companies in St. Louis or wherever, they don't give a damn about your protests out there on the streets. They don't care about, you can put tens of thousands of people in the streets. And some of you will come up later and tell me something that was successful in some kind of protest. But what really blows the colonial folks backwards is dealing with their money. That's what we need to do, is figure out ways that people that control the strip mining, whether it's the Forest Service doing clear cutting, or whether it's the fracking, poisoning the water, people who do those kinds of things need to be dealt with. You can't let a mindless person, we cannot continue to let mindless people poison our water, poison our air, and our earth, and destroy the contours of our land.
I can tell you from my perspective, any climate struggle or any struggle at all that doesn't take into effect the children who are being lost from their homes because of drought, walking across countries, coming into this country and then dying on the floor of a cage is no climate movement, right? If you are involved in a movement, whether it's for the forests or for the oceans, and you're not considering black and brown people who are next to these refineries breathing in these airs that have asthma rates and cancer rates astronomical, you are not in a movement. You are working on an issue. When it comes down to it, solidarity is radical revolution. And radical revolution is about allowing people to be their authentic self in their movement. I always say it. I said it on the movie you're about to see, but you can't tell a rabbit how to get itself out of the mouth of the coyote. That is not your job. You go after the coyote and then we'll know whose side you're on. Lastly, I can say that the blood of my people have been in this land since time immemorial. That indigenous leadership is the single most important thing in this movement. And I'm not saying that because of the fact that we're so strong or we're so, it's not some beautiful, heroic idea, right? I'm saying that literally in this land, our blood has been here the longest and we've been fighting the hardest and we know it the best. And if nothing else, then we know that we know how to survive. And the truth of the matter is, y'all are in some trouble here, right? So I'm saying look towards indigenous leadership. We've always been here. We're always going to be here. We're going to protect this land, and we know how to survive catastrophe like in no one else. But it's not enough for you to do a land acknowledgement at the beginning. It's time to go back to the heart of what we are as a people, as human people. And that is the radical revolution.
I don't care how strong or bad a rap you got. You can talk about mass incarceration and have the best rundown for why that's a problem and all of this, right? I don't care if your animal rights spiel is it's unbreakable, it's right. How much of those kinds of speeches or mentalities can you put together if you don't have water? So without connecting all of those things, we're still limited and incomplete. It's all important. And when you have the opportunity to talk about one thing so that you can bring light to it to help in that struggle, you should. But you should never be limited to one type of revolution. Revolution is endless. We spent 40 years trying to get people out of prison. And if I say so myself, prison is a waste of time, and the government uses prisons for us to be diverted in revolution. And they wasted a lot of our time. Because when you're fighting for people to get out of prison, you're not fighting for the revolution anymore. You're fighting for the revolutionary. And then when the people come out of prison, they're older, they have health issues, they don't have the same energy. So now the energy and resources go toward taking care of them. And of course, you don't want to not take care of them. They've been in prison all this time. You have to take care of them. So it's like, it's a real waste of time. And they wasted a lot of our time.
I've been in the swamps for a while and on these bayous, like in boats with these folks going by these gigantic trees, some of them that were born in the days of the Christian Jesus. I've seen trees that have been moved, manipulated by indigenous peoples, holding them down as saplings so that they grow in a position like this. And those are direction markers. That's where people came together to trade, to pray, to go towards the mounds and are now being pushed into the ocean. In Louisiana, we lose a football field of land every 45 minutes. I know it's hard to wrap your head around, but we've lost over 1 million football fields to date. Thanks to the pollution that comes down the Mississippi River, we have a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico that grows exponentially every year. I can't remember what state it's on. I think it's Delaware, as big as Delaware now. And so these are some of the things that are damaging our ecosystem. We have constant oil spills out there. Taylor Energy's been spilling for 15 years. Some of these people will go to whatever lengths they have to in order to stop us. And it's time for us to get real about that. One time I was sitting at a Sonic having one of those big drinks. I like those big cherry limeades. And I was sitting there having one, and someone came up behind me, and I thought it was a cop. He told me to put my hands on the wheel, and I did. And he grabbed me from behind. He put a knife to my throat. He said that he was going to do horrible things to my children, and that how would they feel when they came out and there was the people in the front yard, our friends had had their throats cut. And then he proceeded to name off all 5 of my friends who had been coming to my house to protect me and my kids every night. He knew who they were. He knew where they were waiting. And it scared me because my kids never asked for this. And so we already had the place in Louisiana. We have 11 acres in Louisiana. We were able to fend off from the Bayou Bridge pipeline. We were the only landowners that they went around. We were on that land with permission from the Occupy.com Nation. And that land is now becoming a food forest, which is going to help feed all of you in these battles, I hope. We've got catfish and lots of fresh vegetables coming your way, hopefully about this time next year.
Could you explain what subsistence farming is?
Okay, yeah, it just means I don't try and make a living at, make an income off the farming. It's just, it's so hard. And small farmers, it's all rigged against us. So in industrial farming, it's just whatever's in the soil solution. You dump in your chemicals. If there's toxins in there, that's what the plant's like, a straw. But in a living soil, there's relationship between everything, and so the plants feed the organisms in soil. Those soil organisms bring what the plant needs, and it's like a dialogue that goes on between. It's this conversation, this whole unique universe down there. If the soil is really healthy and the plants are really healthy, their immune systems work, and you don't need any of the fertilizer, you don't need any of the pesticides, you don't need the labor of cultivation, so your profitability goes way up.
So the argument that we can't feed enough people unless we do monoculture is actually backwards.
It's totally backwards. And to begin with, 70% of the world's people are fed by small farmers still, worldwide. I should just mention the climate angle to this, because we can stop all fossil fuel use tomorrow, and it's still going to be probably at least hundreds of years before the temperature will keep going up, because of the ocean the oceans have absorbed most of the heat and the carbon dioxide, and they will re-equilibrate until they are back to health too. So we actually have to cool the climate, and we can actually do that. Regenerative agriculture can be a really big part of that by rebuilding that soil carbon sponge, which is the living soil, which is the basis of the water cycle, which is 95% of the heat dynamic of the planet. We need to stop. We have to save every last bit of the residual life, the greenery that we have to stop cutting it down. But we also have to rebuild the soil. So if we can switch to regenerative farming, we can actually cool the planet.
One of the things that they're talking about right now a lot is carbon markets, carbon offsets. They're going to, they take this virtual, carbon that we're saving in the ground or with the trees or whatever. And these companies are able to buy these credits. They create this market system so that Chevron and Shell and Exxon and all of those companies can continue to take whatever they want. And it's supposed to offset. It's supposed to, kind of like balance out, right? So we're hearing a lot about the Green New Deal. And some of it, some of it's going to work. We have to transit our systems. We have to have a way to make a living. But they're talking about net zero. And net zero is just another corporate disaster capitalism plan for us to just keep doing what they're doing and pretend that we are balancing it out, that it's not a zero-sum game. So net zero, remember, net zero does not mean zero carbon. It doesn't mean keep it in the ground. It doesn't mean finding other ways to provide what we need in our communities to survive and thrive, and for the next 7 generations.
Lately we've had a lot of, sort of, increasing expressions of concern about climate change. How do you say it? The emergency, the dialogue of emergency, Extinction Rebellion, the rising up of the youth movement. And, this rhetoric about emergency makes me really, really nervous, because I have been in this position of evaluating what the solutions that corporate world is coming up with look like. And when we start talking about emergencies, I've seen over and over again that what that does is essentially open the door to all those things that are sitting in the wings as so-called solutions for us. And one of the big ones has a lot of impacts on our forests, and that is burning trees as an alternative to coal. So right now in Europe, for example, which is probably where this is the biggest, huge subsidies, vast subsidies, unbelievable subsidies go to, like Drax power stations, so on, when they say they're going to burn a little less coal, and instead they're going to turn the forests in the southeastern United States into wood pellets, ship them across the Atlantic, and throw them in the hopper and burn those instead. So they're burning the forests and calling it renewable energy and paying the energy companies incredibly in order to do that. That is, quote, renewable energy. This emergency rhetoric is really concerning to me because it does open this door to all these false solutions. And we've seen this, in terms of the impacts that has on forests, opening the door to bioenergy. If you look at statistics for what renewable energy looks like, production, consumption, whatever, from one of those agencies that does that kind of analysis, what you realize is that currently more than half of what is classed as renewable energy, or about half, depending on where you're looking, but in the US it's about half, of what is classed as renewable energy is bioenergy. That's ethanol, burning wood for trees, whatever, various different forms of bioenergy. The other half is, there's a lot of hydro. Meg Sheehan is here somewhere. She's been working hard to try to push back on the escalating big hydro. And then there's a tiny little sliver of that's like solar panels and wind and things that we might consider to be, sort of good renewables, or at least less bad renewables. So this is not what we think of. It's not really what we're told about what renewable energy looks like. It's simply carrying on business as usual and saying that all we have to do is change the flavor of the energy. So anyway, and it's not just electricity or fuel for cars. It's basically anything that is currently produced by petroleum or fossil fuels that could be produced from living biomass. I don't even like to use that word, biomass. It just is kind of an awful word, biodiversity. Let's burn biodiversity for renewable energy. How about that? So anything, because of chemistry, right? It's all fossil fuels are basically a similar chemistry to living biomass that's just been fossilized and undergone some transitions. And so when I go digging in through that bizarre academic literature, I see scientists who are engineering trees to have reduced lignin being the structural material that lets a tree stand up strong, right? They are engineering trees to have reduced lignin because that makes them easier to turn into biofuels. So we've seen a lot of industrial solar and wind turbine installations going in that are not the kind of model that I think we need. We need, locally owned, locally used, small scale, carefully sited. Don't go in and clear cut a forest and put it in solar panel installation. I think, trying to localize and democratize the control and the use of energy is where we need to go.
So some might say that, look, the time for energy sources that are totally non-destructive is over. We've reached the point where we're going to have to, break some eggs to make the omelet in order to survive. What do you feel that there's some truth to that, or do you feel like there are other options that are completely non-destructive?
There is no free ride when it comes to energy. Nobody has invented a perpetual energy machine that has no impact on the environment or on people's rights or whatever. That's just the way it is. It's sort of a basic law of physics, conservation of energy and matter. So it's the bottom line is no, there is no source of energy that has no impacts. And that's why we have to really be honest about that and not be saying, oh, this is carbon free. Nuclear power is carbon free, or solar panels are carbon free. And we just need to be really honest about what that is, and then reorganize our system and our lifestyles and in ways that are far, far, far less energy consuming.
It's just so easy for these people knowing that they can't get charged on a reservation due to laws passed by, our oppressors. On most reservations, we are only supposed to be policing our own people. And whenever a non-native comes into the reservation and does something, commits a crime or something, they usually go unpunished.
All the fracking, all the pipelines, everything of that nature, that's what it brings. And many of our women continue to go missing. And when we bring it to our attention, we brought it to the attention of many people in regards to the man camps and how our women, the number of women that's increased being gone missing is increased in the past. How long? 2016 and 2019 now, it's about 3 to 4 years, it's increased 3 times the amount. We spread this word not only amongst our tribes inside of our reservations, but outside as well. And I think that you touched upon on our prayer runs. And yes, it's much worse when it hits you, when you're the one that is being told where your sister family remains is. And that's what happened to me. And so we believe in our prayer runs, that we lay those prayers for those ancestors that they're there and they should not be forgotten, the ones that we've lost. And so we've continuously done in small amounts. We're increasing to a bigger amount. Our circle of runs is not just our tribe, because it's not just for it's not talking about only us. We spread out the word. We get runners from all over. And I hope to continue this because everybody is in this together. Our next one is going to be November 22nd. And the reason why is because that's when a lot of people are sitting down at the table and celebrating Thanksgiving. That's the day that we had settlers come in, rape, and murder our people. And we honor our sisters and brothers and ancestors that put their lives.
So you asked, what would we want to tell people about Thanksgiving? I think that's the one day a year where Americans actually admit that they are immigrants to this land. And really, we should be posing the question, what should we ask all those kids in detention centers that are not with their families and not able to have dinner with their families? Because what the U.S. government has done in separating families is not anything new. It didn't just start a couple of years ago. It started when they first came to step foot on this land. I think that when we talk about environmentalism and climate change and the corporations involved in raping and massacring Mother Earth, that Indigenous people and the massacre, the continued massacre of Indigenous people, has to also be part of that table. And it's not an invitation to be part of the table. It's more along the lines of we all have to sit down. It all affects all of us, you know. And we're the canaries in the coal mine. What's happened to us is going to happen to everybody. If we talk about a woman that's been murdered and missing, then we're talking about all women that have been murdered and missing. It's just Native women are seen more expendable. Yeah.
No more stolen sisters. No more missing sisters.
Get rid of ICE.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And let's just continue to stand up for our people.
So you're asking me what is, if I'm understanding correctly, you're asking me what is the things that are challenges to protecting our natural world. And I would say we are. I would say we are. Not just in the realm that we have the enemies out there that we have to fight, but it's in how we interact with each other. That's the most important. How we think and respect each other and we treat each other. Because there's a reason you're here today. It's because somewhere in your past, somebody made a difference in your life. Somebody treated you with kindness. And you decided, you made a decision that you were going to turn around and do the same to others. And we have to get back to that and stop suspecting each other all the time of ill intent. Because to be honest, we're really all we have. We have plenty of enemies. And we have a wonderful, beautiful family. And we have to rely on each other. I realize you're tired. I know you're tired because I feel it in my bones. I can feel it coming off of you. You're exhausted. We've been fighting nonstop for 3 years. Take a break when you need to. Get back up. Hug your partner. Find your friends and check on them regularly. And for God's sake, learn self-defense and how to protect yourself, because nonviolence is a beautiful thing, but not all of us have that opportunity. Some of us have to fight. So be ready for that. And know that you're very, very loved.
I can hear the boots are stomping. Come on, boys, let's get some rocks to throw. I can't stand to hear my father cry anymore. Time we left for nothing, motherfuckers dead in the road. We've been backing up inch by inch, we got nowhere else to go. It's been too many years since you pushed and served my shove. I'm not a violent man, but I will kill for what I